Welcome to Resilience in Life and Leadership with your host, Stephanie Olson. Hello, Stephanie Olson here with the Being Resilient podcast. And I am excited to have Jodi Stout on the podcast today. Jodi Stout of Havana, Illinois, has been married to her husband, Mike, for 25 years. Jodi has 2 children, 2 bonus children, and is grandma to 8 beautiful grandchildren, including a 3-month-old grandson who entered heaven in 2014 and a 16-year-old grandson who entered heaven in 2020. Both grandsons died a preventable death. Jodi knows grief intimately. She has walked through a journey from surface Christianity to a deeper, more dependent walk with Jesus and a purpose-driven life, learning to trust God and submit daily to His will. Through her faith, she has turned her test into a testimony. Out of Jodi's grief were birthed 2 ministries that enable her to reach others who need the same hope she does daily. Jodi is a speaker, leader of Group 15, a small group ministry for local teens in memory of her 16-year-old grandson, and founder and president of Mountaintop Journey, a retreat ministry for adults designed to help them release, reconnect, relax, and be rejuvenated from life's traumas. She is also known as Grandma Jodi to nearly most every teenager in her hometown of Havana. Her mission is to help others through their grief to find the peace that only God can provide. It is a mission determined to help others turn their tests in life to testimonies that will change others' lives. Jodi strives to be a difference maker to others through her love for Jesus. And with that, we introduce you to Jodi Stout. Hello, and welcome to the Being Resilient podcast. And I am so excited to have Jodi Stout with us. I had the privilege of meeting Jodi at a conference and heard a little bit about her story that is just really powerful, very poignant, and something that I think can help a lot of people. So welcome, Jodi. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm really honored to be a part of your podcast today and to share my journey of grief with others.
Great. Well, why don't we just start with that? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay. So like most of us, we all experience grief of losing someone at some time in life. And my hardest journey of grief started 7 years ago on September 17th of 2014, when our 3-month-old grandson, Drew Stephen, suffocated in a blanket while at the babysitter's house.
Oh my gosh.
And, like I said, I've had loss before, but never one that hit my heart so hard. And Drew was my son and my daughter-in-law's baby. So not only was I grieving the loss of my own grandson, but I was grieving watching my son and daughter-in-law go through this heartache.
Yeah.
And I couldn't fix it for them.
Right.
There wasn't anything that I could do to fix it for them or to take it away from them.
Wow.
Drew also has an older brother, Caleb, who was 8 years old at the time. And my heart hurt helping him through this tragedy that turned his world upside down. And his parents did their best to try to help him out too, but they were so hurting that grandma kind of stepped in and helped out. But it almost hurt me to help him. That's how bad the grief hurt my heart.
I am sure. And that's hard enough for an adult to understand, but then for an 8-year-old to comprehend what's happening and why. And I can't even imagine.
Right. I will never forget the day that it happened. And we're all at the hospital and we realized that we needed to go get Caleb from school and tell him. And I remember his dad picking him up in his arms and just not wanting to get those words out and telling Caleb that his brother had passed away and gone to heaven. And man, when those words hit Caleb at a young age of 8, I'll never forget that look on his face. I'll never forget the tears streaming that made us cry even harder. And so, going through that day and knowing the long journey that we're going to have, our family certainly learned a lot about grief. But 5 years later, on March 5th of 2020, my daughter's 16-year-old son, Ashton, was killed in a tragic car accident.
Oh, Jody, I'm so
So at
sorry.
this point in time, I had both of my children, a son and a daughter, who had lost a child
Mm,
due to tragedies.
gosh.
So I honestly, on that day, I didn't know how I was going to get through this again.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
just 5 years later. Um, our family was learning how to adjust to living without Drew, and
Right.
now we had a grandson that we'd had for 16 years
Ugh,
that we were going to have to adjust living our lives without him as well.
that's so
And
tragic.
Ashton, at 16, he was like my best buddy. He did
Mm.
everything with grandma. Um, we had a lot of wonderful talks and fun times in life. He was always there to make me laugh. He was such a leader to his siblings, a leader to his friends in school, to his cousins, to his sports teams that he was involved with. Ashton was just such a leader. So this was just going to really leave a large hole in our lives all the
Yeah.
way around.
Yeah. Rocks your world
It does. It
completely.
really does. And, I always said the grief club isn't one that I wanted to be a member
Mm-mm.
of the first time, let alone again 5 years later, and especially with two grandchildren.
Wow. Wow.
So deep inside of me, Stephanie, I knew that I had a choice. I could curl up and let parts of me continue to die while living on this earth,
Hmm.
which I knew that that would be no good for anyone. It wouldn't be
Right.
good for my family. It wouldn't be good for me. It wouldn't be good for anyone that I could reach out to. My other choice was to learn more about grief and how to cope with it. I I I wanted my journey of grief. I wanted to allow God to work through me with it, to get me through it, to help to heal me. I wanted to allow God to use me through my
Yeah.
journey of grief, so that it would honor Him and it would reach out and help others.
Yeah.
So, during your journey of grief, there are times that you can't move,
Yeah.
can't perform, you're depressed. And this is one of the things that I learned. It's okay because that is grief,
That's right.
but you can't stay there. You can't
Right.
stay in that spot. You can't stay in that rut. It's okay. You're going to have it. You're going to feel it. You're going to live it, but you can't stay there. You
Yeah.
have to find things that can get you out of there.
Right. Right. And feeling those feelings are incredibly important, as difficult as that is to do. It is so incredibly important, because whether you grieve at that moment, I lost a baby, um, and I drank the pain away.
Mm.
And then years later, when I was sober, I wound up grieving that loss with several others. So you grieve at some point, and if you don't grieve then, you will grieve at some point, and then it's just even compounded. So yeah,
Oh,
that
I
is
can
so
imagine.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
I'm so sorry for your loss too. It hurts.
Well,
It
it does
just
hurt. Yeah.
just hurts. So I have two sayings that I say about grief and how it can sneak up on you. Like you said, you can grieve right then, or you might grieve
Mm-hmm.
later. And you know, I was grieving at the time of both deaths, uh, but at the same time, I would think maybe this one day I would wake up and I was doing better,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden, it it hit me again. So I learned about grief and through my feelings and through going through it. But one of the things that I like to say about grief is like an ocean wave.
Mm.
You can be standing on your own 2 feet. You can feel pretty good. You can feel pretty strong right where you are. You can be, really digging your feet in to get a sturdier stand and to be stronger. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, an ocean wave comes over you and
Mm.
hits you, and it
Mm.
knocks you completely off of your feet,
What a
and it
good analogy.
knocks you down.
Wow.
That's exactly how grief feels.
Wow.
And you feel like you can't breathe, and you start to panic, and you can't get back up to the top of the water fast enough. And it keeps pulling you down and sucking life out of you.
Mm.
So many emotions just flood over you, and through it, it drains you physically, emotionally, and even spiritually.
Yeah.
So that's one way to describe it. The second one, I like to say, is the most consistent thing about grief is its inconsistency.
Mm.
About the time you think that you figure out something that makes you feel better, or about the time you think that you've got grief figured out, then something happens that the next time that grief floods you, that those same things don't work
That's
anymore.
right.
It's just so inconsistent. So grief is different for every person. No two people grieve the same way.
Yeah.
No two people grieve at the same time. I've noticed that my grieving is at different times than what my son and daughter
Mm.
may grieve, or how they may grieve is different than how I grieve. And we have to learn to accept each other's times of grieving.
Yeah.
We have to accept each other's different ways of grieving.
Right.
Um, there is a chart out there, Stephanie, that talks about all the different stages of grieving that you're going to go through. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the charts say, oh, it'll last this long and that long.
Do they
Well,
really?
it does.
Huh.
It does. But this is what we have found out. We go through, yes, we've gone through most of those stages that are on the chart. That is true. But out of all of us, none of us have gone through those same stages at the same time.
Right.
Each of us have had a different time cycle of how long that stage will last for us.
Yeah.
And sometimes those stages come back.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, the stages of grief. So I think a lot of times people think they're going to go through these stages of grief in a linear order. And then when they're done with the last stage, they're done grieving, check it off the list. But that's not
right.
really the case.
It's not the
Yeah.
case at all. I say you never get over it. Never get over that death, but you get through it.
Yeah.
You get through it. So those cycles, those different stages, they will come and they will go. And it's going to be like that,
Mm.
probably for the rest of your life,
Right.
because that person is missing
Right.
from your everyday life.
Right.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about how you work through that when those feelings happen. Now, again, what works for me may not work for others, but it would be worth a try for them.
Yeah.
Or, they may figure out what does help them and what might not.
Absolutely.
So for me personally, it really was truly best for me to pray and to be into God's word and to be still in his presence. But I have to admit that at times I was grieving so hard that I couldn't even concentrate to pray. I couldn't, my thought process wasn't there. I couldn't stay focused to pray. My mind was wandering. Sometimes I didn't have the strength to even hold the Bible or a book, if I wanted to read something. I felt like at times I couldn't even feel God. I knew he was there. I had no doubt about that, but I just had that moment where I could not feel him. Yeah. And that is a common thing to feel. And that is when I reminded myself that when I can't pray for myself, that's what the Holy Spirit does. Right. He prays for you. He knows exactly what you need, and he prays for you. And that was a great comfort for me to remind myself that the Holy Spirit was praying for me, and I was too weak to pray for myself. And other times, to try to find some peace for myself and some comfort for myself, I would try to imagine Drew in heaven,
Mm.
sitting on Jesus's lap. And it is pretty amazing that I was thinking of that one day, and it did bring a little peace to me, sadness and peace at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But I then later on my computer found a picture of a little boy that, kind of resembled Drew, sitting on Jesus's lap,
Mm.
and Jesus had his finger pointing out like this, and there was a butterfly on the end of Jesus' finger,
Oh,
and the little boy was looking at that butterfly, and that just brought such peace to me, because at Drew's funeral we experienced a lot of butterflies. They were just
really?
there. Yeah, they
Oh,
were just there. It was very
what a
significant.
beautiful
But
sign.
to find that picture, I really felt,
Yeah.
was a sign from God, just letting me know Drew is really there with him. Drew is really okay, and Drew is really happy, and it just gave me that sense of peace.
I love
So
that.
that's one picture that I will go back to and look at often when
Yeah,
I
just as
when
a
I'm really,
reminder, I'm
yeah.
sure.
And
Yeah.
I always think of that picture too, and that feeling that I had when I originally found it, when I see a butterfly,
Mm,
because I know that it is significant.
that's
And
beautiful.
for Ashton, he had a great friend who is an artist. She's a teenager, but she's a wonderful artist.
Mm.
And Ashton loved baseball. And she painted me this picture of Jesus and Ashton walking through a garden in heaven.
Oh,
Their backs are facing me when I look at the picture. And Ashton's baseball number was 15. So she put 15 on the back
oh.
of his jersey. And Ashton is carrying the bat up over his shoulder,
Mm.
and he's carrying a ball glove in his other hand down towards his side. But Jesus has the ball in his hand.
Oh my gosh, I have chills. I love
And
that.
yeah, I have it hanging at the end of my hallway.
Oh,
And when I see that picture, I don't know, it might be weird for some people to hear me say it brings me joy. It
yeah,
brings me
yeah.
peace. Because who better to play baseball with than Jesus,
I'll say. He's probably pretty good too, right?
I'm sure he is. Heaven is perfect. You never lose in heaven, right? Or if you do, I guess it doesn't really
Yeah,
matter. But
you're not upset about it, right?
yeah, I'm not
Oh,
upset
that's
about it. So
beautiful. That's beautiful.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So it's things like that that really has brought me some peace and some joy.
Yeah.
Now, Ashton's baseball team, uh, they were learning to play without him
Mm,
this last year, and it was tough for them. It was tough on his team,
yeah.
um, and you know, I had a decision to make. I became very close to those kids on his baseball team, and they wanted me to come to their game,
I love that.
and I wanted to be there for them and to support them. But could I really go to a game and not see Ashton
Yeah.
pitching, or not see Ashton batting, or not see Ashton playing first base or running those bases? Um, I knew it would make me miss him
Yeah.
even more. But you know what? I decided no matter what, I'm going to take a hurt if it costs me a heartache. And I'm going to go to that game, and I'm going to go, and um, I'm going to support that team, and
Yeah.
I'm going to help them grieve through that ball game.
Yeah.
And so, I went there, and oh my heart, when I first got there, the very first game, they had a moment of silence for Ashton. He was first baseman, and they played the first inning without a first baseman.
Oh my gosh.
And wow,
Oh,
what an
wow.
honor. They really honored Ashton through that. And somehow, even though I had tears streaming down my face, somehow it also just helped fill that little hole in my heart
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I looked over at the dugout, and they had his jersey hanging in the dugout. And to this day,
Oh
every
my
game they
gosh.
play, they always hang his jersey in the dugout.
That's
So,
amazing.
you
That
know,
is amazing.
it really is. And one of the things that I learned through grief is sometimes people are afraid to do things like that for
Yeah.
fear that it will upset you or it will hurt you.
Or
And some,
remind you as if you have
yes,
forgotten. Right.
yes. And you
Right.
never forget. And in fact,
No.
that's one of the fears is you're afraid people will forget him.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, you want to hear his name mentioned. You want him to be remembered.
Right.
And so doing things like that truly has helped my son, my daughter, and myself and our other family members and their friends. Um, to do things like that really has helped.
Yeah.
It's a touching moment, but it really does help.
It's so honoring.
It's very honoring. It's very
Mhm.
honoring, and it's kind of helping us to live out his legacy
Yeah.
that he left us, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But another thing that has helped me a lot is I have my tribe, and I do not hesitate to call on them. You know,
Mm,
people are always saying, "Call me. I'm here if you need me."
right.
No, and truly, people mean that when they say it, but then they don't always know um, what to do if you do call them,
Right.
or they might not be available at that moment that you call them. So I found a special tribe to surround myself with, and I found that that tribe needs to be a tribe that loves me unconditionally, just
Mm, yep.
totally unconditionally. It is a positive tribe no matter what.
Right.
I can cry. It's okay to cry. You know, they can tell me that it's not a time to suck it up, buttercup. You
Yes.
know, they let
Yes.
me cry. They let me get it up. Crying is a part of grief.
Right.
And, you know, you don't have to do it by yourself all the time. I have my tribe and they allow me to do that.
That's great.
Another thing that I found that helps truly is breathing deep when I'm crying.
Mm,
Just breathe in those deep breaths because it helps you to not go into that panic attack that you might be headed for. And when I breathe in, I'm breathing in God's presence. That's what I'm telling myself is I am breathing in God's presence. And sometimes when I breathe in God's presence, I truly feel like I'm really breathing that in.
um,
Other times I tell myself I'm breathing in God's presence and I don't feel it,
right.
but that's okay. It's there anyway. It's really okay. Another thing that helped me, and it was amazing to have two deaths like this. I didn't know if I would grieve the same,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
at, with both of them. But there were some things that were different.
Sure.
One of the things that I did with Drew, I found like I I wanted to do projects. Like I had to do projects, and so it was September when he passed away, and you know I was thinking, how am I going to get through these holidays?
Yeah.
And one of the things, I don't know why it hit me, but I started doing craft projects and
Mm.
I made everybody everything for Christmas that year. But it really helped me to keep my mind on that
Right.
and to pull me through some of the holiday uh, things. So I just basically distracted myself. Um, that year, I started out though with making tutus for my 7-month-old granddaughter because
Oh.
we actually had Erica Janae was born to my daughter 4 months before Drew was born.
Oh,
So
wow.
Drew had a cousin that they were 4 months apart.
And
So
so this
another
is Ashton's mom, correct?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So when Drew passed away, you know everything we saw Erica doing, we knew that Drew was close to follow behind. You know, the
Right.
first time
Right.
she crawled, the first time she walked. And, you know, to this day, that's why grieving never goes away. Grieving
Yeah.
stays with you.
Yeah.
Because to this day, the very first time that Erica played T ball, Drew should have
Mm,
been there. You
sure.
know, when Erica graduates someday, Drew should be there. When Erica gets married someday, Drew would have been probably close to the same thing, you know,
Right.
or college or whatever. So it's always there. That's why it
Right.
never goes
Right.
away. Don't think it's done because you've check marked all the
That's
stages
right. Right.
off of your list. So then with Ashton, when he passed away, I was not interested in doing any projects like that at all, but I physically wanted to work. I had to do
Mm.
yard work. I had to do the
Hmm.
harder the work, the better it was for me. Just physically, I I had to work and I had to
Yeah.
do things um, to to just feel to work my way through it.
Right.
I just exhausted myself with it, kind of. Other smaller things that have gotten me through some tough moments is I wrote a letter to them. Of course,
Mm.
journaling. Um, Wrapping up in a blanket that Ashton had here that was his
Oh,
blanket helped me sometimes just to feel extra
yeah.
close to him.
Yeah.
For both boys, at one point in time, we had T-shirts made for them, or with their picture and name and
Yeah. Yeah.
information on it. I really do, to this day, still wear those shirts a lot. I just feel
Right.
closer to them when
Yeah.
I do that.
Absolutely.
Um, a girl made me a necklace with Ashton's picture on the front of it, and I
Mm.
just love that because I feel like it's right here next to
Right.
me.
Right.
We also took their funeral flowers, and I had a heart-shaped necklace made. On the inside of the necklace has the flowers from the funerals in it, and I like to wear them. And a
Yeah.
lot of times, people will say to me, "Oh, I really like your necklace," and I tell them, "Thank you
Yep.
so much. You don't know how much that means to me because," and I tell them the story, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry that I said anything." No,
No.
don't be
Yeah.
sorry. That's what I'm telling you. Thank you for saying something about it because it makes me feel really good. So
Yeah.
those are the things, that really help me. Now, sometimes none of those will help me.
Right.
And if I'm at home and I'm grieving, sometimes I feel like I have to get in the car and take a drive, and getting out of this environment will help me through that moment of grief.
Right.
So just
Right.
take a drive, get yourself out of that environment, and you'll find your mind going in a different direction.
Right.
Sometimes reading a book about grieving helps me to understand more. But one of the things that has really hit me, and this has been the same through Drew's death and Ashton's death, the moment that they passed away, I was kind of obsessed, really, with I want to know what they are doing in heaven.
Yeah.
I want to know, uh, is Drew growing from a baby? Is he growing up? What will he be like by the time I get there? Or will he remain a baby? You know,
Hmm.
um, what do they eat in heaven? What do they do all day long? I mean, I know that they praise Jesus and they're very happy there,
Right.
but I think, Stephanie, that heaven is really fun.
Yeah.
You know, I know the boys are having a blast.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
and, it might have been kind of different, but when Ashton passed away, it was very hard. But there was also that sense of, well, Drew's not in heaven by himself. Not that he was in
Yes.
heaven by himself,
Right.
but
No.
Ashton's there. Ashton knew Drew. Now Drew
Hmm.
has someone there that he knew before he went to heaven.
Right.
Um, so that thought has been there also to work through. But I craved reading books about heaven.
Yeah.
I wanted to know more about heaven. Now, my daughter, she needed to know more about grief and how to work through grief, how to get her
Sure.
two younger children through grief.
Right.
Um, so she read this really great book that I'd like to share. It was called Shattered by Gary Rowe.
Mm.
And she said that book helped her a lot because she was shattered.
Yeah.
But she read stories in there about some families who had had car accidents, and the father lost the mother and all three children.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
lost four at the same time. So it's not that it made her feel better, but like she said, there's always someone else that's hurting as much or maybe even more than
Yeah.
you are. Their tragedy was a little bit worse than your own
And I
sometimes.
think knowing you're not alone in that and that
Mhm.
there are other people experiencing not necessarily the same thing, but
Right.
experiencing something that they can understand to some
Hmm.
extent what you might be experiencing. I think
Yeah,
that's comforting in and of itself.
it is. It really is. And we had um, a family from another town not too far from here who, a few years before Ashton, had lost their son in a car accident also. and they had reached out to our family when they found out about Ashton. And
Wow.
actually, Ashton had played ball with their
Mm,
son, and so it was kind of, it was really nice that they reached out to us, and now
absolutely.
we reach out to others that we know are
Yes.
going through it as well.
Yes.
So um, rest.
Yeah.
Rest is a very important thing to do uh, through your grief process. I am not a person that likes to take naps. Life is too busy for me to take naps. I'm not interested in naps.
I'm a big
But
nap fan, so yes.
oh, okay, all right. So, but through grief, I couldn't help it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had to have some downtime. I had to have myself rest, and that's
Right.
okay. You don't need to feel guilty about
Yep.
that. One of the biggest ones for me was I had to learn not to fight myself on what I could no longer do.
That's
I
good.
had, times still yet, especially with Drew, um, I lost some of my organization skills. I
Mm-hmm.
lost some of my planning skills. I was a little more forgetful
Yeah.
than what I had been, and I didn't realize at the time that that was due to grief. I
Sure.
really, really didn't.
Yeah.
I thought there for a while, I just thought I was going crazy. I really
Wow.
did. And until I went to a group that I'm going to talk about in a little bit called Grief Share, that's where I learned that grief can really cause those things to happen
Sure.
to you.
Right.
And so don't fight it. You work through it and you work hard to gain some of it back. Some comes back, some doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when Ashton passed away, I started all over again.
Wow.
So to this day, I'm still, it takes me longer to do things because I have to fight to get that organization that came easily for me before.
Right.
I have to
Right.
fight to remember everything, and I have to make more lists these days. I have to find ways to work around it to get myself pulled through it. And then I have to allow myself some rest because I'm
Yeah.
usually exhausted from fighting um, my way through it. Sometimes I just have to walk away from it and then come back,
That's
and
right.
it goes better. So again, during those times, I've learned to ask for help. That's
Mm-hmm.
when I could call my tribe in and say, look, I simply need help with getting this event planned out. I simply need help with the figuring out the timing of this event that I need to do, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to tell people what it is you need. They want to help, but they don't know how to help if we don't really explain to them all the way from the smallest thing to the
Absolutely.
largest thing that we're dealing with. Another thing is to go do something positive.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't feel like it, try hard to do something positive. Take the bad things and turn them into doing good for others. Um, when I was grieving both kids, but especially Ashton, I really had this feeling that I wanted to go to the mountains. I just kept thinking to myself, the mountains are calling me and I must go. You know that saying, the
Yeah.
mountains are
Yeah.
calling me and I must
Yeah.
go. I truly felt that. It's like I knew that I had to find a way to get to the mountains. The mountains for me, with ocean being second, gives me that peace. It's where I can fill up my empty bucket,
Yeah.
and I can get positive there again. So I really felt like that's where I could connect more with God, was in the mountains.
Yeah.
So the year before, summer before Ashton died in March, I had taken him and his brothers and sisters and all their cousins, and
Mm.
we went to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, to the mountains. And we hiked and we went to the waterfalls and we did all
Wow.
these fun and great things. Thank God, Stephanie, I have those
Yeah.
memories with all of my grandchildren at
Yeah.
that time. And Ashton, his favorite place to go there was called the Chimney Tops. And it was a place where it had a beautiful rushing stream of water going over some mountain rocks, big
Mm.
rocks. And so he would go there and he would say, Grandma, how could anyone come here and not believe in God? He
Oh,
said, you can
wow.
really feel his presence here. He was
Wow.
15 at that time. So I knew that it would be hard to go back to the mountains without
Yeah.
Ashton, but his cousins, his two older cousins, well, they were younger than Ashton, but older out of a group of
Sure.
cousins, they were grieving very hard. Ashton and these two cousins, Dylan and Caleb. So Caleb is the one that lost the brother. Now he's lost his best friend,
Yeah.
Ashton,
Yeah.
and his cousin, Ashton. So they were grieving really hard. And they told me, Grandma, would you please take us to the mountains? We want to go to the mountains. So they were wanting to go as bad as I was. Ashton also had a very sweet girlfriend, sweet little girlfriend. So I took her and her best friend also to the
Neat.
mountains. And while we were there, it was a fun vacation. We had a lot of laughs and we did a lot of fun things, but it was also a time to work through our
Yeah.
grieving. And so we learned to relax through some scriptures that I had looked up. And then we also wanted to release our burdens, our burden of grief, most of all. So we went to Ashton's favorite place in the chimney tops, and each one of the kids picked their own rock, their own boulder to sit
Right.
on. And I told them that's what I wanted them to do. And I wanted them to really pray and take that time for them and God, and just take all the time that they needed. And, we're talking teenagers. So I
Right.
thought to myself, well, this is what's going to happen. They're all going to get on one rock together. They're going to be quiet for 2 minutes and then, it's going to be over with. I didn't know if they would really do it or not. I was wrong, Stephanie. They wanted this so bad that each one of them picked their own rock to go sit on away from each other. And I literally have pictures of them totally bowed down before God. And they truly laid all their burdens, grieving Ashton being the first one. Some of them were facing family issues or school issues or, illnesses or whatever. And they laid all those burdens down at Jesus's feet on that rock. And I told them, then just let the water rush over the rock and wash all those burdens away. You gave them to Jesus. You're not allowed to bring them back here to the picnic table with you. They are gone. Gave them to Jesus. They are gone. And breathe him in, breathe in that miracle and that healing, and breathe in his presence and bring that back with you to the picnic table.
I love
And that is exactly what they did. And they felt that release. They felt that reconnection with God, and they came back rejuvenated. And then we enjoyed the rest of our week. And when we left that week, we all felt a sense of being better and doing something positive. And we knew that we were still going to struggle, but we knew that we were going to get through it.
Absolutely.
So it worked so well, Stephanie, that I was then inspired to start a new ministry, and I named it Mountaintop Journey.
Oh, neat.
And so I took what I did with the kids there in Gatlinburg and I expanded it a little bit. It's truly like a week of retreat. And we learn a lot about grief. We talk about grief, but mind you, grief can be because you've lost someone. It can be through a divorce. It can be through an illness you're experiencing, a loss of a job.
Absolutely.
Grief can be a lot of things.
Right.
So no matter what you're grieving, no matter what your burdens are, you will fit in on this retreat.
Neat.
So since I have talked to you, I have done a couple of these retreats, and it has been amazing. We stayed in the cabin, up in the woods, in the mountains, and we did all those things. We relaxed, we released, we reconnected, and we came home rejuvenated.
Oh, that's
and
wonderful.
It is an amazing thing. On that retreat, I introduced the book, The Jabez Prayer by Bruce Wilkinson. And it's an amazing prayer that a lot of people don't know about, asking God to bless you. And we spend time learning about that as well as going through grief things. And it has been amazing what God has done on that journey for the women that I have taken.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's almost like God takes our chaos right there and he puts order into it. He puts it into order for us. and then we can come home, and not that it's
It's not
something that we're not going to deal with the
right.
rest of our life.
Exactly.
We just feel better about dealing with it. We've learned some things of how to deal with it. We have that special connection with God about it now, and we just feel so much better about it. So this next summer, Stephanie, I'm so excited because starting in the month of June and going through the month of October, I am planning on doing 8 journey trips.
Wow.
Yeah, 8 journey
Wow.
trips. So women out there,
Yes.
please contact me. I'll give you the contact information at the end of the podcast. But
Absolutely.
I'm looking for women that might want to go and experience this week of mountaintop journey and
That is
see what
incredible.
God works through. And it's amazing how I just kind of put it out there on Facebook that I'm putting a group together,
Mhm.
and people start contacting me and they make the decision whether they're going to go or not. It's amazing the group that God puts together. I don't
Well,
do it.
right. Exactly.
I don't go out there begging for people to come. They just come and say they want to go. And it's amazing the team that God puts together. It really, truly is.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah, so I'm really excited about that. So now one other thing I want to talk about with is um, through the process of coping with grief that I've been working with others on. How do I
Mhm.
help them cope with grief? So I had mentioned Grief Share. When Drew passed away, there was a Grief Share group right here in my own hometown. And at first I was like, I don't want to go to that group. I don't want to sit there and say, hi, I'm Jody Stout. I
Yeah.
lost my grandson, and I figured it would be people I didn't know. I didn't know, I really didn't think I'd want to share with. But
Right.
I went, I took that step of faith and I went, and I'm ever so glad that I did.
Mhm.
That's where I learned that I'm really not going crazy. This is grief. You
Right.
can really feel this way with grief. And honestly, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders when I found out this is really grief. And there are ways of coping with it. There are ways to get through it. And so if I can get myself better, I can help my son and daughter-in-law. Now I can help my daughter and son-in-law,
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
through all of this. So Grief Share was one of the things that really helped. Now, when I went the first time, it helped me so much that I wanted to give back. And giving back is another way
Yeah.
that will help you heal. Believe it or not, you can never give back too much. You
Right.
can never outgive God, no matter what you give, your time, your money, your resources, whatever. You can never outgive God. So I went back and I started helping with Grief Share, and I started helping other women. It just so happened that 5 of my girlfriends here in my hometown had all lost their husband within a year of
Wow.
each other.
Wow.
And so that whole group ended up coming to Grief Share, and it was an amazing Grief Share group. And we still continue to meet sometimes to support each other and to help each other and to check in with each other. So Grief Share, I like to think of it as throwing a pebble in the water and you watch the ripples go out and out and out.
Right.
And that's how Grief Share is. It reaches out to others, and you learn that, and then you can reach out to others as you begin to heal and go through grief.
Absolutely.
Also, when Ashton passed away, I connected with many, many of his high school friends. They actually opened up the gym
I love that.
the next day. There were so many hurting teenagers and everybody in shock and trauma.
Yeah.
And so the community opened up the gym, and it was flooded with like over, 200-300 teenagers
Wow.
that night. And I didn't know whether I was going to have the strength to go or not. I hardly had
Yeah.
a voice to be able to
Yeah.
speak or anything. But his girlfriend, Mariah, really asked me to go with her. And she told me that Ashton had shared Jesus with her.
Oh.
And he was killed on a Thursday night. And that Sunday, they were going to go to church together for the first time.
Oh.
And she was going to go forward to get baptized. And so she really wanted to go to the gym that night and share that with their
Wow.
friends, because she said, what if some of them would have been the one in the car? What if they
Mm.
didn't know Jesus? they wouldn't have been going to heaven like Ashton did. And we all knew without a doubt that Ashton was in heaven. So I went to the gym with her that night, and there had been some changes in the planning of the funeral, and it needed to be announced, and my daughter couldn't do it. And so it just kind of fell in my lap. And I didn't expect to say a whole lot, but I don't know, the Holy Spirit just filled me up with some things to say out to these kids, along with Mariah standing next to me. And it was amazing that afterwards, all these kids came to me, and some of them wanted to know more about Jesus. Some of them said, we really need to continue to meet. Can we not just let this be the first time and the last time that we meet? So we ended up forming a group called Group 15. The kids named it because 15 again was Ashton's baseball number. And so we have Group 15, and it's been, a year and a half, coming up on 2 years of Ashton's death, and that group is still going very strong.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. Now, we've done some fun things. We've done movies, we've done bowling, we've done Bible studies, we've done a harvest dinner where we decorated outside on a beautiful night. And I got a group of adults to come and help me do that. And we cooked a special meal for them, and we served them outside under the moon, lights in the trees. And we truly just served them and honored those kids and loved those kids. No matter what's going on in their life, it's just been amazing, this group of kids. And the thing, Stephanie, is, sometimes, especially with teenagers, even with adults, we can attend something for a while, and then it kind of, there's a season and a time for everything.
Yep.
And not that it's always going to last, but this group has really lasted. They just keep coming back and coming back for more and more and more. And it has been amazing and such a blessing to not only these kids, but to adults in Havana and around that watch and see what these kids are doing.
Yeah.
And to my kids to see the action of these kids doing good things because of Ashton and Drew's death. It has changed our community.
What an incredible legacy.
It is. Yeah. And that's the legacy that Ashton wanted to leave. I know that it was, and God is using it to bring other kids to him and to change those kids' lives. Our church has doubled in size.
Wow.
Our youth at our church has doubled. It's been amazing. I've been honored to baptize several of Ashton's friends. So that has been a very positive thing for me to do. And they're learning about that peace that passes understanding that they really never knew about before. And Ashton passed away 2 days before his brother's birthday.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
Yes. So that was really hard, really hard. And that night at the gym, the kids asked me to bring Carter with me because they wanted to honor his birthday.
How old was Carter then at the time?
Carter was 7.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, 7. So I took him with me to the gym, and those kids had balloons, and they had cakes and cupcakes, and they sang happy birthday to him, and they brought him gifts. That kid had it was really awesome. Very thoughtful things for him too. And that helped Carter remember how much he was loved on his birthday. That was really hard to celebrate as a family.
Yeah.
And they gave him gift cards and movie tickets and things like that. That kid heard all year long how much he was loved. And it was so touching. And because he had a younger sister, they didn't want to leave her out. So they blessed her with things that she could go and do with Carter for the whole entire year.
Oh my goodness.
And so this last March, when it had been the year mark, it was amazing because the kids asked me to do a special group just so that Carter and Erica could come to the group. And again, they blessed him and, just reminded him that they are really loved, and that those kids have helped them get through some hard times. So those kids have reached out to my other grandkids and taken them places and done things with them. So Ashton left behind another legacy. Ashton loved to help other people and be there for them and stuff. And he had this saying of spread kindness like confetti.
I
So
like that.
we had bracelets made with that, and we kind of said things like, it's now Fernetti confetti because that's his last name was Fernetti.
Oh, that's
And
cute.
so we're always looking for acts of kindness to do in the remembrance of Ashton. And it's amazing how not only the kids, but other adults and families in our community has passed on acts of kindness, always in memory of Ashton. And
That's
then my
beautiful.
daughter took a positive thing and she started a scholarship fund for
Oh,
Ashton
amazing. Yeah,
that evolves all around safe driving. And she started a group at the high school about safe driving.
that's
And
great.
we're hoping to do some other things in the near future with safe driving. Now, my son and daughter-in-law who lost sweet baby Drew due to
Hmm.
suffocation in a blanket, they have started handing out sleep sacks to
Oh,
women that are pregnant or who have just had a baby so that they don't use blankets. They use the sleep sack instead. And they
that's
go out
great.
and they teach education um, to all different places. I've helped them a little bit. We've done it to pregnancy centers. We've done it to hospitals and things of that nature um, to educate people with safe sleeping habits for
Yeah,
babies.
yeah,
Um, Information that needs to get out there to save those babies' lives. So it's just about taking those something tragic and horrible that has happened to us, but turning it into good and using it for good. And that's exactly what God does with
I love
our
that.
hurts, our tragedies that He knows all about. He takes our hurts and He makes good out of them.
That's
Is it
beautiful.
is it you know something He wanted to happen in the first place? No. We've learned not to blame God.
Right.
Satan wants those horrible things to happen to us, not God. God takes those horrible things and turns them into good for us and for others.
God wastes absolutely nothing. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Wow, that's so beautiful. So, so what I'm hearing you say in, through both of those grief journeys that you had is that it really looks different for every person and even every grieving situation. So that could look different for every situation. And I think that is so important for people to understand is that, um, you know, your grief journey doesn't have to look a certain way. And I think that having that faith that you have in Christ and having that hope is
Yeah.
so important in that grieving process. Um, it's just it, but it doesn't necessarily go away. We can take that grief and we can use it for something that God turns it into absolutely amazing things. The other big thing I want to really point out that I heard you say, and I think this is so critical, is we, if we have people in our lives who are grieving, need to be there, need to be a support system, not necessarily to say something profound. That is not what we are there for. We
No,
are not necessarily there to tell people what we think they need to hear. We just need to
mhm.
be there.
You just
And
need to be there.
yes, yes.
Yes, just
And it's not you know, saying something about a loved one who has passed is not going to remind somebody, oh gosh, I totally forgot about the grief I was experiencing. You just brought it back up. It's an honor to have somebody say something about our loved one, to have somebody say something that, I was thinking about Ashton the other day because of this. That's
yes,
that's an honor.
it
And
is.
I think people shy away from that because they don't want to hurt anybody.
Mm-hmm,
But that
mm-hmm.
hurt is already a
It's
part of
already
the walk.
there. They
Right.
deal with it every minute of every day.
Right.
You're not
Right.
reminding them at all. You're not going to hurt them.
Right.
It really is an honor And it does make you feel good. Even if it brings tears, it still makes you feel good that they haven't forgotten Ashton, or that, um, they, a lot of people say to me that, they saw a rainbow, they thought of Drew, because a
Mm.
rainbow was another significant thing the day of his funeral. There was a beautiful rainbow
Oh,
that came out by the cemetery.
wow.
And so when rainbows happen, that happens. And this is another thing that was really just awesome for our family to experience. Football night, it was senior night. Ashton would have been a senior this year.
Mm.
So this year is particularly hard for Sarah
Yeah.
to get through, knowing that Ashton would be a senior, but they were going to honor him on senior night. So we went to the football game, and the kids are so, like, they want to make sure that Ashton's not forgotten.
Yeah.
And so we all go to the football field. We're sitting there waiting, and the team is out there, the cheerleaders are out there, and this huge rainbow
Oh,
comes across the field. I mean, it was amazingly beautiful, and you could see from end to end. And it's like so many of the people in the stands, we all just go, oh,
oh,
and
wow.
all of them were like Ashton and Drew. It
That's
was like
beautiful.
Drew at one end of the rainbow and Ashton at the other end of the
Oh, I
rainbow.
love that. I love
And
that.
yeah, and it's like, yes, it gave us tears,
Hmm.
but yes, it gave us hope,
Yeah.
and it gave us peace, and it got us through
Yeah.
what was a tough moment for Sarah to
Right.
get through, you know?
Absolutely.
And so for people to recognize those things, or, if you know of someone that's grieving, um, don't be afraid to mention their birthdays or
Yes.
their holidays that are coming up without that person. And, ask them if there's, what are you going to do for their
Right.
birthday? What are you
Right.
going to do for your birthday, even though your son's not here to celebrate it with you?
That's right.
What are you going to do for Christmas? I had to ask both my son and my daughter,
Right.
okay, we've got our first Christmas coming up. Do you want the kids' pictures by the trees? Do you want us to give them a gift? Do you want us to donate money to a charity? Do you want nothing mentioned at all? You
Right.
know, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And for us, our family has always chosen to do something. It's been 7 years for Drew, and we still do something for Drew
Yeah.
every
Absolutely.
time, you know. So I always say, if you're trying to help someone that is in that grieving process, stand in the gap for them.
Yes.
Stand in the gap for them. That's what we're called to do, and help them out. And don't be afraid to mention their child's name or their husband's
Right.
name or whatever. Don't be afraid to bring up the memories
That's
that
right.
they already hold in their heart. Don't be afraid to say, you know, that you experienced something that made you think of
Hmm.
their loved one,
Right.
because it is honoring them.
Yes.
It's honoring them.
I agree. And I think too, when I lost my I had a later term miscarriage, and I had to give birth to the baby, little boy size of my hand. And what was so fascinating about people's response, I had one friend who came over and said, "It's up to you. We can talk about it. We don't have to say a word. We can just sit here and cry, or we can laugh. What would you like?" And my response was, "I want to talk about it." And so I pulled out pictures and the blanket, and we just cried and talked, but it was so beautiful because she gave me that option.
Yes.
While so many other people either pretended it didn't happen, or made a joke about it, gosh, I was a vocalist, and that, you're gonna get the song back in your life soon, or people who told me that was God's will, you
Mm-hmm.
know
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
things are not needed.
No,
we
they're
we
not.
we don't have the answers. We
Right.
don't know the whys, and we don't need to know. That's the beauty. I always say, I don't need to know. I know the one who does know, and he's got it taken care of. And
That's
so
right.
I think when people, if you have somebody in your life who is grieving, the best thing you can do is pray for them, let them
Yes.
just be there for them.
Just be there for them.
Yeah.
Yep. Stand in
Yeah.
that gap. And I know Amber, my daughter-in-law, one of the hardest things that she dealt with after losing Drew was people would say, well, you're young, you'll have another one.
Oh,
You know,
jeez.
that was really hard for
Yep.
her. Doesn't matter, she's going to have another one. And she did have another one.
Yeah.
5 years later, she did.
Does not replace
We love him
Drew.
dearly,
Yeah,
but we still miss Drew.
of course.
Jace does not replace Drew. You know, Jace
Yeah.
and Drew should have been here both, you know. And I liked what you said about asking why. We chose to not ask why, but to ask, what God am I supposed to do with this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how some of the ministries, that's how the acts of
Right.
kindness came out of it, you know. And so it's not asking why, it's asking, what can I do with this?
Right. I love
And,
that.
and then doing it. You got to put some action behind it.
Right.
And
Right.
do it. And
that
you know,
took time. That wasn't
it's
the
not
next day. That
yeah,
was
exactly.
a
It does take time.
process.
It does
Right.
take time. And at first, it might not even be you doing that action. It might be
Right.
someone in the tribe kind of starting it for you. And then eventually you join it. You know, I've kind of done that for my daughter. And for my son, I kind of started some things, and then, you know, they joined, and we worked together on it as they were able to. And that's probably one of the other important things, that if you are trying to help someone get through that grieving thing, your friend was perfect in how she put it out there to you and giving you that choice. But the other thing to do is, don't expect anything from them.
Yes. Yes.
Don't expect them to bring a dish to the next holiday event.
Right.
Don't expect them, you know, to do anything, because they might not be able to do it. They don't need to feel the guilt of not being able to do it.
Yes.
They might not even be able to make a decision on what they should and shouldn't do.
Right.
So no expectations on them, at least for a while. I remember telling my daughter-in-law, it was very hard for them to go back to their home.
Yeah.
The nursery was, after Drew passed away. And so they stayed here for a couple of weeks. And I told my daughter-in-law, the only thing that I expect of you is to get up out of the bed a couple of times a day and to take a shower and to get dressed.
Right.
That's all I expect. Other than that, I expect nothing from you.
Right.
And that was just for her own health.
Right.
I wanted her to do that. So, you know, just don't expect too much.
Yeah.
And
give yourself grace, because, and I think, you know, as a grandma, Jody, not only were you grieving, but then here you are, a mom and a grandma I mean, that has got to be so difficult, because you're grieving, and then there has to be some, you know, you feel there has to be some sort of strength, because you're my baby. I've got to hold you up, and that's got to be so challenging.
Yeah. It has been a great challenge. And then, you know, my son and my daughter are two different people.
Sure.
And
they always are, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's really hard too, to be able to work with them on, this one may want it this way, and this one needs it to be this way.
Right.
And there's no right or wrong to it at all. But it's really difficult in sometimes being able to help both of them when they want something so differently. And, you know, it really, that in itself is a grief process to work through.
Exactly.
I can say today, in the beginning of my grief, it was really hard. You know, I'm a mom of 2 children that each have lost a child.
Yeah, that's,
you know, I've lost 2 grandsons that weren't supposed to go before me to heaven, or so we think that way.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But so it was something to really work through. It really is. But
well, and you have obviously done incredible things, and you know, really bringing two ministries to life and really making a difference in people's lives through your grief and what God has shown you. And I think that's really what it's all about.
That's really what it's all about. Probably uh, my last thing to really say is our testimonies, our tests are our testimonies.
Right, right.
Testimonies are to be told and shared.
Yep.
We don't have them to keep them to ourselves.
Right.
We have our tests, we have our tragedies, and we need to turn them into testimonies.
That's right.
To help other people and to honor God so that he can help those that we might not even know.
That's right. Share your story. And that doesn't even have to be a huge platform. That could be one-on-one.
Yes,
And
yes, there's a
talking,
thousand different
yeah.
ways to share your
Yeah.
story. For some people, they write a book.
Right.
I don't, at this point in time, I don't call to write the book.
Yeah.
Um, I take people to the mountains.
Yes.
But other people do it one-on-one. Other people
Right.
do it more silently, maybe by sending a card or something
Yeah.
with a note in it or something of that nature. There's thousands of ways
Right.
to
Right.
tell your testimony.
I
The
love that.
important part is that you just do it.
Yes. Oh, Jody, this has been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed hearing your story and talking to you. One last question before I ask how people can find you. Tell me how you would define resilience.
Oh, wow. Um, Resilience. I think it is, for me, what I said earlier is you're going to go, you're going to be in tough spots. It's not staying there. It's
Mm-hmm.
being resilient enough to bounce out of that place and go share that testimony.
Yeah.
It's not staying in a spot that is not a healthy spot or a good spot for
Yeah.
you to be.
Yeah. We can
Bounce
sit
up.
there, we can feel those feelings, we can be in that pain, but we don't want to camp there for a long
That's
time.
right.
We want to move
That's right.
forward and keep
That's right.
moving on. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, how can people find you? How can people get involved in the mountaintop journey and all of that good stuff?
Okay, well, I am glad to share that with you. First of all, I want them to know my phone line is open. If they just want to call and say, I need to talk, I need to cry,
Mm,
or I have questions or whatever, I'll do my best in talking with that person. If they are interested in going to Mountaintop Journey, I'd be happy to put them on a list through this phone number as well. That number is 309 253 9138. And then I have a Facebook page. My personal page is Jody Stout, Jodi Stout, Stout. And I'm from Havana, Illinois. I also have a Facebook page for Remembering Ashton. And you are welcome to join that group and see what all we do for the kids. And I
it's
put a lot of grief.
fun to watch that
Oh, good.
Facebook
Thank you.
group. I love that. Yes.
It is. And I put a lot of information about grief and things on there as well. So that page is Remembering Ashton, again from Havana, Illinois. And then I also have a Mountaintop Journey page on Facebook, and that's exactly what it's called, Mountaintop Journey in Havana, Illinois. And then my email address is Jody, Jodil Stout, Stout, @gmail.com. So Jody L. Stout @gmail.com. And I would be honored to hear from anyone at any time through any of those places that they can get a hold of me.
Fantastic. And we will make sure to put all of those in the comments and in the podcast so that you've got access to that. And Jody, thank you again for being a part of our day And I want to thank you, listeners, for joining us with Being Resilient podcast. And we look forward to talking to you next time. Bye.
Thank you, Stephanie, for what you do.
Thank you.
It was an honor being on your podcast.
It's an honor having you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please share with anyone you think will benefit from this podcast.